Emerging Trends in Real Estate came out last week and more or less said that the Tier 1 cities are the cities that will grow first and are the preferred cities for the capital markets. And then they also said that the rimland cities in the United States are preferred as well. Last I checked, Milwaukee doesn't fit either of those boxes. And I know you might not be Milwaukee experts here, but what are your thoughts on Milwaukee or Milwaukee-like cities or the Midwest doing well in the, how should I say, fledgling turnaround in the markets?
I think Milwaukee and the Midwest in general is probably the best positioned region in the United States. I don't think you suffered the overproduction. I think the lending practices here in the middle part of the United States are a little bit more conservative. I think the deal velocity wasn't so great, and so underwriting may have been a little bit better during that period of time. And I think that the situation here is just not as grim. If you want to see grim, go to Bakersfield, go to Phoenix, go to Las Vegas. The specific cities that are in the tank are going to be suffering for a long period of time. But I would be rather upbeat. I think the recovery here will be slow, but it will be steady. And I would, if I were a betting guy, I'd bet on the Midwest rather than either the left or the right coast.
Great. We got a guy from Chicago who can comment as well.
I think the leasing fundamentals here are okay, but as it relates to capital flows coming back to Milwaukee, I think it's going to take some time. If you think about it, a couple of years ago, why the capital came here is you had public and non-traded, private REITs looking for yield, right? So they have a dividend to pay of, say, 7%. And when you're looking in the major markets and you can only do deals at a 6.5 cap, and you're looking for yield, where are you going to go, right? You're going to go to the secondary markets like in Milwaukee, where you can get an 8 cap or an 8.5 cap. Well, what's happening today is you can get those 8 and 8.5s in the major markets. And so until there's competition in the major markets driving those pricing down, driving cap rates down, you're really not going to see those capital flows here until that happens.
I would agree with both Ryan and Jack. I mean, if you look at data from different sources, Las Vegas is actually the most distressed market in the entire country based on its size and the amount of distressed properties out there right now. But having said that, the last few years before the bubble were characterized by capital coming to secondary markets in search of yield because prices were so high on the coasts. And so they pushed prices up in the secondary markets across the country. That dynamic has simply ended. So it's going to be a long, I think, slow recovery for secondary markets in general.
I think going forward there is going to be this flight to quality, and when I say quality, I really mean big liquid markets. So in that respect, Milwaukee's not well placed. And following up on some of Mark's comments with respect to ULI, one of the themes that came out was this move towards gateway cities. And gateway, when I say gateway, it's really the gateway to the rest of the world. And I do want to touch on the global economy if I can. And it does tie into my next comment, which would be while Milwaukee will not benefit, I think, on the office side, I do think that Milwaukee and the Midwest will benefit on the industrial side. I'm incredibly optimistic about exports. And so if you have local manufacturers that are exporting, you are in for an incredible boom. And so I think industrial could really, really surprise on the upside. And I'm not just saying for Milwaukee, but right the way through the Midwest. Office, not so much, but certainly industrial.
Great. Maria.
I pretty much agree with everyone. That was a great observation. I think that a lot of the so-called second-tier cities and markets are dependent on what happens on the coasts. The coasts, when they do come back, will come back quickly, and they'll come back strongly. And what you see in a lot of those different markets is you have barriers to entry in San Francisco. You have constraints as to how much you can build, which is going to drive the costs up. Every time those markets come back, the costs keep driving up, which pushes everything into the second-tier markets. The observation on industrial, I think, is terrific, and I would agree with that, because the same thing is going to hold true with costs for transportation and logistics, especially when we have issues like we did in the Port of Los Angeles with congestion. So there's going to be a big drive toward the inland markets and getting the goods to the consumers faster, and that's where the Midwest, whether it's Chicago, Kansas City, and other Midwestern inland ports, will be have a huge benefit in the future.